I'm really excited that I have Tamsin back with us in conversations. Tamsin was probably, you were like one of the very first, I think when I started, Tamsin, let me have a look. Tamsin was...
I think I was the second
number 4. You were number 4. Yes. So Tamsin has an incredible, she's a physiotherapist and has a Pilates, physio and Pilates practice in town, also specializes in craniosacral and visceral therapy. And meeting Tamsin for me was so exciting because she's got such a wealth of knowledge, and besides her wealth of knowledge of anatomy, her passion. I did a teacher training, I was going to say last year, but it's already the year before. So I invited Tamsin to come and do a section of do the anatomy for the yoga teacher training. And there it's just been a really, I mean, I've learned so much more and got so much more excited about anatomy. So I'm not going to give it all away. We are going to look at stress and stress management through the various modalities that Tamsin offers, but it's your absolute passion that gets me so excited. So welcome to my kitchen. Hello, everybody. Get yourself comfortable, and the kitchen is yours. Hi, Tamsin.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Elaine, for having me again, and yeah, for getting this initiative going. I think for a lot of people, it has been really important to just see other people, and also just, I love hearing different practitioners talk about all their different things. It's nice to learn about different fields. So yeah, and thanks to everybody who's joined. I see some familiar names and faces, so thanks very much. So yeah, I think I'll just start with, who I am. Elaine already sort of introduced me. I'm Tamsin. I am trained as a physiotherapist, and I have a practice in Cape Town. And I am passionate about my physio. Well, I was and am passionate about my physio. And as I went along on my physiotherapy journey, I started to realize some patients just weren't getting better, even though I went and did extra courses and I became more skilled in sort of, say, sports stuff. There was just some patients get better and some patients don't. And so it led me to sort of look at, well, what else is there? So I did Pilates and I did gyrokinesis. I included that. And that was really important because how we move and moving the body is extremely important. But that still somehow wasn't enough for some of my patients. And then my dear mother, who is iPad Kathy, if you see the name on your screen, she is also a physiotherapist, and she did craniosacral therapy. And she said to me, I think you should do the cranio. And once she'd done it on me, I knew that this was it. This was kind of like the answer to what I had been looking for. And then from the cranio, I've gone on to do more visceral training. And really, this is sort of my new love affair. I'm absolutely passionate about it. And the reason I'm so passionate about it is because the craniosacral therapy and the visceral therapy are both the most amazing tools for treating your nervous system. And your nervous system, we'll come to a little bit later in some anatomy, but really it's the essence of you. It's your brain, it's your spinal cord. It tells everything else in your body how to behave. And so people who come with like the same musculoskeletal problems, sometimes you actually need to go and treat the nervous system to get that muscular problem to relax. So yeah, that's sort of where I've gotten to. And then how I came to the stress was, there was a lovely book called The Stress Code that was written by a man called Richard Sutton, and he is actually South African. And at the end of this talk, I'm going to talk a lot about like different links you can go and look at. I'll send it all to Elaine and she can give it all to you. So if you don't have a pen and paper, it will all be there. But yeah, I read this amazing book called The Stress Code, and it just made so much sense to me. And so it sort of really talked to the cranio and the visceral. So that's what I'd spoken about last year. And Elaine said, please, can I come back and really talk about the stress? Because obviously we're all in this very stressful, uncertain kind of environment. Yeah, so I suppose we should start with what is the definition of stress? And according to the Oxford English Dictionary, it is a state of mental or emotional strain resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. So I think the big thing you want to take from that is the state of mental and emotional. So stress is one of the really sort of key things where you can see how the emotions can have an impact on our physical body. People sometimes can't always correlate that, but stress is basically our body's response to any kind of fear. So, if you're being chased by a lion, fear that you're going to die, or fear that you're not going to meet your deadline. So fear is an emotion, and it's how we deal with that emotion. And that's also where the visceral therapy is really related to emotion. So our stress response that we have when we suddenly have this massive stress response, it's a biological shift that happens within us. It involves cortisol and adrenaline, which we'll chat a little bit, but it's basically our first line of defense, and it is what has allowed probably humankind to survive for as long as we have. So there's always a question of like, is stress bad or is stress good? And I think the short answer to that is like short bouts of acute sort of what they call stress is actually really good for us. And in fact, particularly for sports people, they actually look for that. It's like the performance zone. So we'll get into why that's so important, but it's the long-term stress that can have these sort of negative impacts on our body. And that's what we want to try and sort of say is, how can we give you tools? Because the problem is we can never take stress away. Stress, there's always going to be stress in our life. So we can't go and live on a beach in Mauritius. We have to actually say, well, what are the tools that we can have to cope with whatever may come our way? So how can we make ourselves more resilient? That's quite important. Yeah, so I'm not really sure. I know some of you out there, I don't know how anatomical you are. So I will try and keep it as layman's terms as possible. But if it's getting a little bit over your head, don't worry. I'm sure you can ask questions. I'm very happy to answer questions. That's the one thing I wish about this, is that it was people could just, shout out in the middle. But just write it in the chat if you think you're going to forget, and we can go through it at the end. Yeah, so I suppose the best place to start, because we spoke about it a bit earlier, is the nervous system. So we've got something called an autonomic nervous system, and that basically, it runs automatically in our body. We don't have to think about it. And the things that it sort of controls is it's all your sort of things like blood pressure, heart, breathing. So the one big thing that we can do is we can change our breathing. So that's the only thing that's in the autonomic nervous system that we can have voluntary control of. We can't sit here and think I'm going to change my heart rate, or I'm going to change the rate of my digestion. By doing certain things that have an effect on our vagal tone, we can affect those things, but we can't actually physically go and say I'm going to change my heart rate, but we can do our breathing. So that's a big thing to hang on to. So we go back to our autonomic nervous system, and you can divide that autonomic nervous system into two parts. And most people sort of have heard this. You've got your sympathetic nervous system and you've got your parasympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic is what people normally think about as your fight or flight, and your parasympathetic is more a sort of rest and digest. So the whole point of the autonomic nervous system, in fact, the whole point of our body, is to be in this sort of state of balance. So it's never the same. Something will always go up, and then something, I think about it like, in these big offices where somebody puts the thermostat on and then it's too hot and then it's too cold, and it's forever fluctuating. There's never like a set thing. It's always moving. And that's really what the goal of our body is, to be in homeostasis and to be in balance. So yeah, what happens when you go into a state of stress? So an example would be if you were walking through the Lowveld, say, and you saw a line, you would have to decide, are you going to stay and fight this line, or are you going to run away? So the first wave that happens is it's almost automatic. You have in the first 2 to 3 minutes, you have about a 300% spike of your adrenaline and your noradrenaline. And what that adrenaline does is it affects that autonomic nervous system. So it sends your blood pressure up, it sends your respiratory rate up, it heightens your sense of smell and taste and vision. So everything that your body needs to be able to survive, it does all of that. And that's where they sort of talk about that performance zone. For sports people. The other thing is, in that first little bit, it has an effect on your immune system. So it has a really positive effect on your immune system. It sort of gets everything into action. And that can also have an effect on sort of, it dulls down your pain and increases your euphoria. So you often hear of these people who, in some very stressful situation, there's examples of people, say, in the First World War, when they were being shot, they would run from one side to the other, and only when they got to the other end, someone would say, geez, you're missing your arm. Because their body had to choose between survival, it didn't send those messages, and it just gave them so much adrenaline. So you often hear these sort of superhuman feats. That is the results of the adrenaline. And then the next wave that happens is in the next sort of 15 to 80 minutes, and now you've seen the line and now your body's going into action. The next thing that happens is your pituitary gland, which is the gland that sits up here in your brain area. It gets activated and it starts to release cortisol. And that comes from your adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And basically nearly every cell in our body has receptors for cortisone. So it has this massive effect on the body. An initial and short term of cortisone is really, really good for us. Often you'll hear doctors prescribing cortisone, and it has a really good effect on our immune system. So again, it's sort of bolstering us for whatever may come. But the problem is, in the long term, it's really detrimental. You can kind of imagine that if you were to keep going with this massive blood pressure and heart rate and adrenals being produced, it's like your body running on full throttle, and it can't sustain that. And then what actually happens is it almost turns around and becomes extremely detrimental. And so that's where there's all these sort of things where it can affect your digestive system. So if you have long-term stress, some of the things that people see is so this is all in studies, and if you want to read all the research, then you have to read the book called The Stress Code. That I'll just give you like the little bits of it. But so what it does to your gut is if you think about if you were being chased by a lion, your body is doing everything it can to get away from a lion. It's not worried about digesting your granola that you had for breakfast. So what happens is your movement of your gut doesn't work as well, and the fluids and the secretions of your enzymes don't happen. So people end up getting things like irritable bowel syndrome or leaky gut, or any kind of inflammatory kind of bowel things, often constipation actually also, because if you were being chased by a lion, you wouldn't stop to go to the toilet. Yeah, so it's like those kinds of things. Yeah, and then the other thing is, we spoke about it, it will decrease your immune system. So even though in the beginning it boosts your immune system, when it's running for long terms, it actually dampens down your immune system. And so then what happens is, you see they're starting to think like, is this maybe why we're seeing so much cancer? Is because maybe people are living in so much stress that actually their immune system is not able to fight off those cells, and so then they have things like cancer, and also potentially increases in our autoimmune diseases that people see. Is that the body's unable to, it can't run on that full throttle. It needs to sort of come back into balance. Interestingly, for your brain, quite scarily, your brain volume actually decreases. And this has been linked to things like anxiety, depression, and cognitive disorders. So you can think, if I just think in my practice in the last year, because of COVID, how many people we have seen who are battling with anxiety and depression, and then you think, well, potentially it's because of the stress, and it's because of this long-term cortisone that's running through their body. So that's why I think it's so important that we can try and do something to give people tools. The hyperconnectivity of your brain's emotional center also becomes more activated when you have long-term. So that means you're just more emotional. So again, it feeds into more depression, more anxiety, more kind of fear. So as you can hear, long-term stress is really not that great for us. And in fact, I've been reading Richard Sutton's second book called Stress Proof, and that has a lot to do, very much related to now with COVID. And it's frightening to see the amount that mental health and stress are costing. A lot of it's done in the States, but how much it actually costs in billions and trillions, and sick days, and not productive days. So even though people are not sick, they come to work, they just can't actually function. And I mean, you can see why when you read this book and you understand all the anatomy and all the things that are happening behind it. So even though they might be willing, their biological shift is actually such that unless we can take them out of that state of sympathetic flight or flight and get them back into more of a state of the parasympathetic, there's always going to be these imbalances. So just quickly to talk about COVID, because it was something I sort of wrote in the little blurb there for Elaine, is that there's now something coming in that people are starting to call long COVID. I don't know if anybody's heard about it, but there's not that much research. I mean, as it is, they're still trying to figure out COVID and things like that, but there's a lot of research that's coming out. So for example, King's College overseas, they did a study, and they said that at least 1 in 7 people who've had COVID will have symptoms still at 4 weeks. So they won't be contagious, but they'll have some symptoms. So whether it be fatigue, headache, brain fog, dizziness, nausea, still don't have their sense of smell. 1 in 20 will still have any of one of those symptoms at 8 weeks, and 1 in 45 people will still have symptoms 12 weeks later. And interestingly, Wuhan in China, they did a study where they said they think it's actually affecting younger people rather than older people, the long COVID. They said the median age was 55 years old, and the US Centers for Disease, they actually say the main age is between 18 and 34. And I must say, we're seeing a lot of that in the practice, where people have been ill, and let's say like their parents have been ill, their parents recover quite quickly, but they somehow just don't seem to get over whatever it is. And each person is different. For some people, it's fatigue, and for some people, like I said, it's the headaches, or Yeah. So I find it all really interesting, but there definitely seems to be, some studies are saying 10%, some are saying 20%, but in people who've had COVID, there's like a 10 to 20% chance that you're going to have a symptom for like 3 months post-COVID. So that also is something to think about. And one of the things I mean, how do you treat it? They're not really sure. And I know the NHS is busy trying to roll a whole lot of information out so that GPs are able to help the patients that come. Because a lot of the time you go to the GP and they're just like, well, sorry, I can't help you. And I mean, there's nothing to say that we can help you, but my feeling is anything we can do to boost your resilience and to get your body more into balance will probably allow you to recover a little bit better. And one of the things that they do say is like rest and pacing yourself. So just trying to keep yourself on a graded program and not doing too much and then having like a burnout and then, you know, trying to come back. So that also is sort of what, when Elaine was asking me to talk, flagged my head as I saw this article written by the Upledger Institute. And the Upledger Institute is the institute that I studied the craniosacral therapy with. And they spoke about something called dysautonomia. And they said there's this group called the Dysautonomia Project, and they're a non-profit organization. And they have sort of dysautonomia is like an umbrella term for anything related to your nervous system. So something like brain fog, lack of smell, nausea. So when I heard that, I thought, geez, but those symptoms sound so similar to the long COVID symptoms. I haven't seen anything that's linking them, but it sort of got my head going. And what made me come onto this talk is because they are not affiliated with the Upledger Institute, but one of the top 10 things that they suggested for treatment for people who are suffering from dysautonomia is craniosacral therapy. And that's what made me think, well, maybe these people who are having long COVID, maybe crania or osteo or something that's going to sort of calm their body down and allow their body to come more into a state of homeostasis so that healing can occur. So that was really what triggered me, and I thought I must sort of try and share the news. And I'll put all those things down for Elaine so you can go and read the studies and things yourself. So I suppose what I need to do now is maybe explain to you what is craniosacral therapy, because I'm not sure how many of you know about it. So because I can't see a raise of hands, I'm just going to go for it. So craniosacral therapy is your cranium or the bones around your skull. So I brought my little friend to show you all the different bones of the skull. And then your sacrum is the little triangular bone that sort of ends in your tailbone. And you can think that from your skull to your tailbone runs your spine. And inside all those bones is your brain, and that's extending into your spinal cord, and it runs down and attaches the dura onto your coccyx. So the craniosacral system is looking at the cerebral spinal fluid, which is a special kind of blood that moves around the brain and the spinal cord. So if you can imagine it being like a tadpole shape. So think of it like a cardiovascular system, which is your heart and your blood vessels and the blood going all around the body. Your craniosacral system is your cerebral spinal fluid moving around the brain and the spinal cord. Yeah. Hope everybody's got that. And so just like you can put your hands on somebody and you could feel their pulse, and you could say, well, the pulse on the right arm is different to on the left, or from the right foot to the right arm. And it sort of gives you an idea of somebody's cardiovascular state of well-being. So you can do the same thing with the craniosacral system. You can put your hands on a body kind of anywhere, and you can feel the craniosacral rhythm. And it has a normal rhythm. So if it was on someone's legs, it sort of rolls in and out. It should be sort of symmetrical. And you're looking to see, is it equal? And wherever you go along the body where there's a imbalance, it's sort of telling you that something is out of balance. And so we can then go and try and treat those areas. And why it's so important is because obviously your brain is housed around here. So we want to try and improve that fluid. You can imagine the better we get that cerebral spinal fluid moving around your brain, the better it's able to function. So things like brain fog, headaches, dizziness, all those things can get much better. So remember we said the heart is what pumps the blood. So in the skull, amazingly enough, if you can see, I'll try and hold it there. Can you see those sort of little lines? And can you see all the different bones are different colors? So you can see how it almost fits together like puzzle pieces. And what's really interesting is originally we were taught that these bones are actually fused, but they're not fused. They have those little jigsaw pieces so that they can move. So if this was a real person and my hands were on their parietal bones, if I can move my fingers, it sort of does that, and then it does that. I mean, it doesn't actually do that, but that's what it feels like. So the movement is, it almost feels as though it's expanding, and then it almost feels as it's contracting. And that movement, so the ability of these skull bones to be able to move, is what creates this sort of very small hydraulic pressure, which allows the fluid to flow around the body. So it's really, yeah, so when you think of something like dysautonomia, which is an umbrella term for any issue with your autonomic nervous system, you can see why craniosacral therapy would be such an effective treatment, because you really are treating the nervous system, and it's a very gentle. So that's also the other thing, is we'll get to a few tips that Richard talks about in the stress code, about how you can help yourself to try and calm your nervous system down. But like if you go for a massage, you can't have a really strong, really hard massage, because then you're increasing your pain and potentially your inflammation. So if you're going for a sports massage, that's a different story. If you're going for a massage to try and calm your nervous system down, you kind of want something that's really gentle and that's working with the body and not necessarily putting more energy or working against the body. And that's what's so wonderful about the craniosacral therapy, is it you're just assisting the body to be in a better place and helping pick up any restrictions and release any restrictions that are present in the body. Yeah, I feel like I'm talking a hell of a lot. I'm going to have a sip of water and let you all digest that. So now we can get on to, so what are the tools? Let's say you live where Mara lives. I can't remember where she lives, somewhere in Limpopo, I want to say, but maybe I'm wrong. But I know it's not in Cape Town. So now Mara can't come to the practice to have craniosacral therapy or to go for cranio. So what can she do to try and help bring this body back into balance or to work on her stress level? So I must give credit, because this is where most of this comes from. It's from this book called The Stress Code, and I'll write it down for you. Yeah. I also really just love that it's written by a South African. That really just makes it ever the more appealing. Yeah? So I'm going to run through the list of tools, and then we're going to go through them a little bit. So breathing exercise. So remember we said that your autonomic nervous system, the one thing that we can do to affect that nervous system is we can change the breathing. So breathing is one of the biggest tools that you can use to try and bring your body back into a state of balance. So one of the other things I didn't talk about is there's this nerve in our body called our vagus nerve. So not like Vegas party, V-A-G-U-S. And it's also another name called the wandering nerve, because it sort of starts here and it wanders almost all over the body. And if you read the book, when they talk about your stress axis and measuring stress, they speak a lot about how if you can increase the tone of the vagal nerve and you just make that vagal nerve happier, it automatically shifts your stress, your biological stress. You go down on the stress axis. So that's really what we're looking for. So very often, for example, and Daphne will know because she does a lot of work as well, if you're working on a body and you get a gurgle, it means that you've now activated almost like the digestive system. That is a vagal response. So then you know, you almost, if you think about it like a staircase, you're coming down that staircase from your high sympathetic state down to your parasympathetic state. Yeah. Another thing we often look for is like a deep sigh, because it's changing your breathing. Okay, so just the vagus nerve is, if you hear people talk about that, that's also where craniosacral therapy and visceral therapy works so well, is because we're able to affect that. Right, so breathing was the one we said. Swimming, yay, for beaches being open, because otherwise there's not much else to swim in Cape Town. Facial immersion, so if you can't even get to the beach because we have another lockdown, you can stick your face in a bowl of water. Yoga, meditation, music, massage, but remember you can't. Strong massages for like sports stuff. Massage for relaxation needs to be just that. It needs to be fairly light touch and more sort of gentle, nourishing kind of stuff. And visceral manipulation, which I'll chat to you about in a second. Right, so let's start with breathing, because I would say if that's all you take from tonight, it is the biggest tool that you can use. Super easy, for free. So they did loads and loads and loads and loads of studies, and they say that 5 to 6 breaths per minute is like the magic number. Obviously, before I go any further, there's loads of different kinds of ways of breathing. So I mean, Elaine will know from yoga, there's all different kinds. The breathing that they're talking about here is they're really trying to get into diaphragmatic breathing. So there's studies that show that the more you use your diaphragm, which is the big muscle that sort of sits under your lungs, that has a direct sort of feedback loop into the brain to calm the nervous system down. So when you're running away from your line, you'd be breathing here. That sends a message to the nervous system to say, I am still in a state of stress, keep being in a state of stress, run from this line. But when you stop running and you go back, you should be breathing into your diaphragm. Yeah. And when you breathe in your diaphragm, that calms you down. So 5 to 6 breaths per minute. And if you can, on a 5-to-5 ratio. So 5 breaths for an inhale, 5 breaths for an exhale. Sort of quite long. He doesn't say anything in his book, but I have read a lot of other studies that also if you breathe through your nose, so you want to inhale through your nose because it activates your limbic system, which is also in your brain, also has an effect on your emotional system and calming you down. You can breathe out through your mouth or through your nose, and that doesn't affect the limbic system. So it's just inhale through the nose. He suggests doing it for 10 to 12 minutes every day. But in the beginning, it can be quite a lot. And actually, a lot of people sometimes feel faint or, yeah. So start maybe with 3 to 4 minutes and then work your way gradually up by like a minute every day. And he suggests doing it at night before you go to bed. And I must say, a lot of my patients will always tell me that they sleep quite well. If they wake up in the middle of the night and they can't sleep, they do their breathing exercises, and then it really helps to calm them down. So there you go. One thing that you can do. You don't have to lie down. You could do it in sitting. So if you're on your way to a really stressful meeting, do some breathing exercises. Yeah. Okay. Swimming. So why is swimming so good? It activates your diving reflex. So again, it's all about survival. When you go under the water, your first instinct is to hold your breath. And it's sort of like, it triggers this sort of safety reflex. And so no matter how stressed you are, it sort of, your body will just shut that off and go straight to survival mode. So it's like a way of sort of hacking into your body and saying, you know, don't worry about that, just worry about this. And so that's been shown more than running or any other exercise to really have a really good effect on your vagus nerve. And cooler water tends to have a better effect. So yay for cold Rocklands and Clifton and Camps Bay. Yeah. And they say like 30 minutes. I mean, look, you can use it for anything. So you can do swimming like lengths, or you could also just get in and have fun. Both of those things, both are going to help calm your nervous system down. So long as you put your head under the water. So you can't granny style around the pool. Yeah, you have to actually get your head under to activate the diving reflex. Okay. If you can't get to a said pool, you can also just immerse your face in water. So that's why often you'll see people splash their face, yeah, to try and calm themselves down. So that is activating a different reflex. Obviously, when you go under the water, both reflexes will be activated. But when you splash your face like that, you're activating, I think it's your 5th cranial nerve, which is related to your trigeminal nerve reflex. Don't worry if that's too fancy for you. All you need to know is that it helps calm you down, again, by means of activating these reflexes, which are involved with our nervous system. If you can't splash the water, or what some people do, is you could get one of those little face packs, you know, like when you go for spa days, and you can keep them in your freezer, and you pop it on. Yeah, you wish for a spa day, me too. But you can have your own spa day at home with your little ice pack. Yeah, and you put it on for about 1 to 3 minutes. And that's also supposed to help calm you down. So there you go, you need a little face pack. Yoga, I mean, I think Elaine is the person to speak on yoga, but yoga kind of speaks for itself, yeah? Because it's including your breathing, it's making you think about your body, so it's bringing you back into your body, so it stops your mind from racing all over the place. And then the next thing on the list is meditation, and depending on the kind of yoga you go to, often there's a bit of meditation included in your yoga. So do you want to hop in here and say something about yoga, Elaine?
Yeah, definitely yoga helps. I mean, granted, there are various styles of yoga, but its premise is based on getting you connected to your body, allowing you to disengage from the cerebral thinking brain and activity, and allowing you to just tap into just an awareness into breathing. Because the thing is, we aren't often aware of our own breathing. So just using it as an opportunity to breathe consciously in and out. And when you do, just like you had mentioned, the belly breathing, the diaphragmatic breathing, I mean, we can all do this now. It's really nice if I can just take 1 minute. If you are in front of your screens, put your, let me see, where am I? I'm trying to
Good
move
demo.
in here, but I'm going to do a little demo. So put your hands onto your belly. And I can see if you're there, like Clint, put your hands on your belly. You don't have to show it to me, but put your hands on your belly. And then just breathe out like you're a little pregnant. And then breathe in and draw it back in. We're going to do 5 of those. Inhale, long and smooth. Exhale. Inhale. Take your time. Exhale, nice and smooth. Inhale. Exhale. 2 more. Inhale. Stay with me. We're not going anywhere. Exhale. Last one. Inhale. Exhale. Okay. So I did it because could any of you possibly do any thinking or listing while you were doing that breathing? No. So if for 10 seconds or 20 seconds, or as Tamsin said, you build it up to a minute, 2 minutes, if you can get to 12, that's remarkable. It just gives the brain an opportunity. It's like pressing the refresh button. So a form of yoga that isn't really your power yoga, your vinyasa is fine. And the breathing that's included in it is just so, there's so many different styles, Iyengar, but it just gives the brain, you know, it's the brain where we feel so much stress, especially when you're thinking about a situation you have no control over, like COVID. So yeah, I can't say enough about yoga, but back to you, Tamsin.
Yeah, so I mean, like you were saying, so the meditation is also something, so that's why yoga is so great, because certain styles are the meditation and the breathing and the being in your body and actually moving, which has its own things of like endorphins and things like that. So that is obviously why yoga is so good. Obviously, it all depends on the kind and, you know, what you're doing it for. Meditation, I mean, most people know that that's pretty good for calming you down, but what I always find mind-blowing, okay, I'll read it to you. Meditation positively affects our DNA in such a way that it reduces inflammation and improves immune regulation. And I've been doing, I read another book about You Are the Placebo. I don't know if anybody's read it. If you have, I'd love to hear from you because I found it fascinating. And that's Dr. Joe Dispenza or something like that. Yeah, do you know? Yeah. So he is the man, I don't know if anyone's watched the documentary Heal, but he's the man who fell off his bicycle and fractured like 6 vertebrae of his back. And he basically healed those 6 vertebrae within 10 weeks, all through, I mean, he did diet and all those kind of things, but meditation. For every day, 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, he would meditate like a blueprint in his brain about how to heal his back. And he did. I mean, that's just for me mind-blowing. And when you read his book, again, I love it because it's very nerdy and it gives you all the research behind it. And the research just keeps on showing how important meditation is and what we all knew it was good for us, but actually the actual biological effects and the shifts that it can make in your body, and that it's for free, you know. So I don't know enough about apps. I'm not a very technical person, but you can download, I know, loads of these mindfulness and meditation apps, and otherwise go on a course if you're not good with apps. But definitely, I feel like it's the message that keeps coming to me, whether I read that book, whether I watch the documentary Heal, whether I read the stress code. It seems to be the smallest, easiest tool that people could do to help themselves. Yeah, music. So, I mean, I suppose it depends on all the different kinds of music you listen to, but listening to slow, calming music helps with increasing that vagal tone and releasing your oxytocin levels. Oxytocin is like your feel-good, like hug kind of hormone. Yeah, I mean, and there's got listening to Mozart has been shown to increase growth hormone levels. I mean, you can go that specific, but I just think listening to music and enjoying it is just as good. So if you don't like Mozart, just listen to whatever you like. Again, because it's like a form of creativity. And then your visceral manipulation. So visceral manipulation, your viscera are your organs. And visceral manipulation that's done by a group called Burrell Institute. And it's all about our bodies are supposed to be in motion all the time. And if we do a forward bend, say in yoga, not only is our spine forward bending, so are our intestines and our lungs and our liver. And so we need to make sure that those things inside us can move just as well as, say, our shoulder. So just like you can actually test somebody's shoulder for range of motion, you can actually do a similar kind of thing. You can check with the liver, obviously all from the outside. Yeah? Can you take the liver and could you mobilize it forwards or backwards or up or down? And you can feel the fascial restriction. So fascia is your connective tissue that runs everywhere in the body. So often you'll go, let's say for physio, and they'll say, oh, you've got a tight back, and then they'll massage your fascia in your back. But that fascia in your back is connected even deeper. And so it's the same as like craniosacral therapy. When we're working on these cranial bones, we're working on your fascial system. It's all connected. So working on a cranial bone can have a, can impact on your foot injury that you had however many years ago. So viscera is really amazing because they talk about the organs being the echoes of our emotions. And so if we go back to what we started off with stress, and we said stress is a mental and or emotional response. So if you think about it, when you get upset, you don't get upset in your foot. You often feel it in your gut, or and people have these words. I mean, I treated somebody, in fact, I think it was Kathy, who told me that she felt gutted, and I was like, so there's an exact example. And then often those people are coming in with gut-like symptoms. So, I mean, it makes sense. And so that is why my passion is moving towards this field, because as a physiotherapist, we obviously want to help people. That's why we studied physiotherapy. But sometimes only treating the outside can be a bit limiting. And so by being able to have access to this fascial layers on the inside, it also helps us. If we apply our normal physio stuff to a shoulder and it doesn't work, well, maybe you actually have to go and treat the liver, because the liver is a little bit stuck because, I don't know, maybe they've had an infection or stress or a car accident, because the liver is quite a heavy organ, so it can really pull if you have a lot of trauma. And then their shoulder range will improve. So yeah, how the visceral helps is because by mobilizing those organs, we're able to improve the mobility, we're able to improve the fluid, that gets the glands secreting, and that helps rebalance the hormone levels. And so I think also it's about, instead of looking at one little thing, it's about looking at the whole system. So by treating somebody's uterus, you can then have an effect on the reproductive system. Or like, for example, I've got a patient who's got an issue with her bladder and she's previously had bilharzia, but actually I need to treat her kidneys and her ureters that run down into her, but she's also had back pain. And I'm pretty sure that once we've treated the kidneys and the bladder, the back pain will kind of go away. So it's looking at the whole body. Yeah. I don't know if that was a really good example of visceral. But I will add a little link. I wrote a blog, which is probably a lot more succinct, and you can go and have a look, and that will probably help you. So yeah, I think that's probably enough. I feel like that was a lot. So I would say fire away with any questions.
Unmute. There we go, unmuted. That was amazing. I mean, I'm so fascinated by, the work that I think for me, I can't speak for other people, but before I'd heard about craniosacral, and through you, I've heard, in the past year, visceral manipulation, and I'm really interested, but it sounded a little bit abstract for me. But you explain it, and it makes so much sense. And I know teaching yoga, for me, the thing that I often say is, everything is connected, but how you explain now, any movement that we do, it's not just the physical movement that is connected, but organs get connected as well and also need the movement. So you didn't speak too much at all. I could sit and listen to you for hours, but I'm going to open up the floor very informally. Daphne, thanks, Tamsin, for your passion. Right. I know, I adore, thank you, Daphne. I just love that you come and listen, but also your passion is so palpable. So has anybody got any questions? Please feel free, just raise your hand. Let me see, or put something in the chat.
I think my mom wants to say something.
Yes.
Other number one fan. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Tam. As you know, I'm not very good on all of this high-tech stuff, but there is just something I wanted to add. Having done all this craniosacral, and I'm almost sure it's going to be very fascinating, because I know that you're going to end up treating patients who've had COVID, because so many people have been affected, and just with time, they will definitely walk into your practice. But one of the things I always noticed, treating patients who've been involved in a trauma or have had surgery, whenever you put your hands on them, you will always feel a dampening on the one side that might have been involved. And if they've had a head trauma, that flow that you have, the filling and the emptying flow, what we call the rhythm, if there's been a head trauma, it's very, very depressed. And then as you go and you get to the end of your treatment and you test it again, to me, it is always amazing to see how much it is just so improved. So I'm almost sure that with this COVID situation, the patients are going to benefit so much from this kind of work, other than just the stress levels coming down. But I would be interested to hear from you and the other physios in your practice, as you treat the patients, how much you find in the change of the rhythm. Okay.
That's why I'm doing this talk, because I think so many people have had COVID, and if 20% of those people are going to have long COVID, then what are we going to do to help these people? So yeah, hopefully it helps. I mean, we've got to try it.
All right, great talk. Thanks, Pam.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
It certainly encouraged me. I mean, I realized it's been too long since I've had a session with you, and I think it just sounds like the best thing to do right now. And anything that, this kind of therapy and just what you've said, the tools, but for all of us to really look at our well-being, not to use well-being as a thing that you do when you're just standing at the cliff. Because
I forgot to say that this stress code, it didn't say anything in the first book, but in his second book, he keeps referring to the app, which I did download, but then I didn't have time to look at it. But it's free to download it. So if anybody wants to go and have a look, you can go to the stress code. So he has this app. I don't know like how much is free, because I think if you want to do an assessment, that's often how it works. But like I said, I'm really sorry. I was planning to have a look at it. I just didn't quite get there, but I did check that it was free. So at least you can download it for free, and then you can check it out yourself and see how far can you get, because it looks as though you can use it to sort of, do questionnaires. And then he will then it obviously spits out to say like, okay, well, maybe do swimming once a week, or a massage once a week. And then you can maybe do those things and then retest yourself. So, for those people who maybe can't get to a treatment, there are still those things to do, or give it to somebody, tell somebody who needs it. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of also, integrating it as a lifestyle, as opposed to waiting till you're so stressed that's dire straits. That's when we turning to these tools, but using them every day.
For me, this should be in every high school. At the moment, more and more people I speak to, and when I read these books and I see in his new book, actually, he has a section that he talks about perfectionism and how the new generations are so, because of a lot of it is social media, there's like this, it's just, they've been brought up in a different way, potentially, to older generations. And that in itself has created a lot of anxiety. And then there's COVID on top of it. And yeah, someone I was talking to in the practice was saying she's actually just grateful her daughter is okay, because everywhere around her in the neighborhood, people are really battling. And so I think for me, it's like the youth, like I said to Richard, he does a lot of stuff in corporates, and I'm like, geez, I feel like the stuff needs to be in schools. I feel like the teenagers need these tools. It's hard enough, I think, being a teenager.
I agree with you so much. I think that we've moved into an age where everything has shifted. We're going to have different syllabi. There's a whole, and something that just like this should be integrated into the new syllabus, because there has to be new ways of learning how to look after ourselves. And, anything from the old regimes or old ways of handling our lifestyle actually needs to be updated at this time.
Then also I think of these kids who are going to go back to school, and then you go back to school and the focus is all going to be on like catching up on all the school they've missed. And actually the focus really just needs to be on letting them be okay. And I'm sure they learned something while they weren't there. So I think, it's all these measures that need to be met all the time. So, a lot of these schools are now incorporating yoga, which is fantastic. But again, is it just one of these things that you can just drop your kids at and it's like, okay, well, or is it actually sort of, is there the understanding of why behind it? Or
Totally agree with you. Absolutely. Is there anybody else? I know it's so nice to just hang out in the kitchen or on your couch, or anyone that just want to like ask a question. Oh, Irene, let me have a look. Check the might have covered this, but Does handle on craniosacral.
I mean, what does it entail to have a session? I can't see, where's Irene? But it's not on the screen.
Yeah,
Irene,
sorry. What is it?
oh.
Let me just.
Yeah, Irene.
Yeah. So what, I mean, what is if somebody came for a session, what would
do
happen?
Yeah. Okay. So normally you would come in, and then like a normal physio session, we would ask, why are you here and how can we help and what are your goals and all those kinds of things. And then actually we tend to use our hands and we tend to feel, and we talk about listening, which is a little bit, sounds a bit sort of like pink and fluffy, but we really do listen with our hands. We've trained our hands to be able to feel. So I will put my hand on somebody's head. So a bit like my mom was saying, when you can actually feel if there's an area that doesn't move as nicely. So sometimes we're looking for movement. So when we do the craniosacral assessment, I think I'm waffling. Right. If you come for a craniosacral therapy session, you lie on the bed on your back. I normally start at your feet, and I check the rhythm at your feet. So we've got like what we call listening stations. I check the dorsum of your feet, which is like the heel. Then I check the top of your foot by your ankle. I check your thighs. I check your pelvis. I check your respiratory diaphragm. I check your shoulders for your thoracic. And then I come and I check all the cranial bones. And what I'm looking for is, if you imagine my hands were on your thighs, if it goes like that and like that, that would be a normal expression of your craniosacral rhythm, because there's an equal amount of flexion and extension. So that's happening all the time, but people are not aware of it. So if you know how to feel for it, then you can feel it. If, let's say, this leg was moving like this and this leg was not moving at all, then like my mom was saying, this is like a bit more dull. And often this will be like a leg that's had a trauma or whatever it may be. So we then, once we've gone from the feet up to the head, we can then decide, where is this body in the most dysfunction? Where do we see the most abnormal rhythm? And then we go and we treat that by using very gentle techniques. So it's a bit like, I always say to people, it's like having an internal massage. Sometimes it feels like we're doing nothing. Sometimes the body moves quite a lot. So each person presents themselves in a different way. Some people have emotional reactions. So I had a patient who had come to me, and so let me finish with my visceral. So if you come for a visceral assessment, it's very similar. And I actually often combine the two because they're so interlinked and we need everything to be in balance. So for a visceral assessment, I generally start in standing and I put my hand on top of your head. And from there, I can feel, does it go left? Does it go right? Does it go forwards? Does it go backwards? And the theory with that is that our body hugs the lesion. So let's say I put my hand on the person's head and it feels as though I'm sometimes it feels like I'm sort of side bending. And it is as if this t-shirt had a stitch in it. And if I put my hand on the top of the t-shirt, I would feel that someone's pulling it down. That's exactly what we do with our hand. We're able to palpate into their fascia and feel where is there the most tension. And then we check it again sitting. So we check it in a few different areas. We lie it down and then we do a more local listening. So we go to that actual area. So let's say now we think it's on the left-hand side. We put our palm over that left-hand side. We feel, we can tell from the depth and the feeling as to which organ it might be. And then we can say, okay, it's more spleen than it is, say, descending colon or stomach. Yeah, and then we treat it again with really gentle techniques. I don't know if that helped explain your question or answer it. Did that help?
Irene? Her screen is frozen a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tamsin?
Yes.
Hi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see who's talking. So
Okay, wait, hold on. Wait, hold on.
Saul, there you are. Now I can see who's talking now. Yeah.
Yes. I just want to ask you a question.
Yes.
So, based on what I do for a living in the financial service industry, there's a lot of stress, obviously, based on COVID. But even before that,
yes.
How do you sort of diagnose people that have short-term or medium-term, so they're going through something that's financial, maybe emotional? COVID hasn't been that long, so like there's been a lot of emotional stress that lasts, divorces, breakups, miscarriages.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
How I'm quite interested to know how in the short term, like what do you you go to psychotherapy or you go to a psychologist, whatever. What is the term? So what is your rate, like success rate? So like six visits or?
How many sessions do you need? Is that what you're
Is it,
asking?
and I'm sure it's
Like,
variable.
how long is a piece of string?
Exactly. So it's the same as me. Like, how do you get
No,
somebody
I
out
mean,
of debt?
normally
How do
what
you-
I say to my patients is, come for 3 sessions. So you have a session, I normally give you about 2 weeks, and then you have another session. Obviously, it depends completely on the patient.
Mm.
And then after 3 sessions, we'll have another discussion. And if you say to me, nothing has changed, then I would probably say to you, maybe we need to find something else for you, because not everything works for everybody. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So then I would maybe refer you on to one of my colleagues, like an acupuncturist, or maybe Rob Delgado, or, you know, somebody else, Daphne, you know, anybody who is going to work with your body sort of holistically. Look, bearing in mind, I'm not actually an expert on stress. I have not written the book. I'm just super
Is anybody? Is anybody?
Well, it sounds like Richard is. I'm really just fascinated in this topic. And also, I think what I've become fascinated in is how effective it is treating people's nervous systems and treating,
100%.
yeah.
Oh,
So,
I've got a sore back. And then in my job, you explore that, oh my God, they're calling in my loan or whatever. And then you realize that that's why I've got a sore neck, you know?
yes.
So I think this is my first session with Elaine, and Elaine, I have to thank you. I've been watching you during the whole of lockdown, advertising what you do, but this is really important. And I think there's a very big connection between they call it the 7 spheres, your physical, your emotional, your spiritual, whatever, all of that stuff. And I think where we're going is when my clients come to me and say, I've got a sore back, or my mother's ill, or it's all, yeah, exactly. It's all connected. And this has been great for me. Like, I've been back, I went on holiday for 5 days on March the 20th last year and came back 2 weeks ago. Okay.
Wow.
So this is, yeah, Elaine, this is your thing, and you shouldn't stop it ever. So thank you very much, guys. Like, really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so, and you'll come on one day.
Well, I've got lots of stories to tell, as we all do.
Yes.
You know, some spiritually, some physiologically, some financially, but I think this is great. And I think
being able to share stories, and that's where we connect. So nobody has this feeling of like, well, I'm not part of that group, or I'm not part of this industry. We're all sitting in my kitchen. Like, what happens in a kitchen is usually like your guard is let down, you can relax, you take off the tie, and at the same time you can do a couple of things. Storytelling is the best way of sharing information, of educating, of, I believe, like doing business. This is how you can move forward. We're relaxed. There's a trusting, kind community, and it's about like working together now. So, you know, sharing something even as that can get into kind of a medical and more sort of
physiological. Emotion, we learn without having to go into a coffee shop and randomly meet somebody. You have no time. You just don't have time to tell people about your expertise without charging for it. You know, I think this is brilliant. I think it's brilliant.
Okay, thank you so much. And I mean, Tamsin, also, you know, to be able to hear someone with your wealth of knowledge and then passion behind it, and then give of your time to do something like that, for me is always just such a blessing. So I'm always so delighted when you come on and just share, you know, whatever you have and your latest sort of nugget of info that you know, info that you're going to share with us. So is there anybody else that just wants to ask any question?
You've got a great kitchen though to do this, right? Okay.
So I'm planning like one day post lockdown, we'll do both. You know, we'll have
we can all come to your kitchen and you can cook us something.
So we do it online and live.
Fantastic. Love you guys.
Okay. Lekker, man.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Fantastic. Me too.
Kids got to go to bed. It's school night. That
Okay.
hurts there.
Lekker to see you, so.
Love you.
Tracy.
Elaine, yeah, please. Hi, Tamsin. Thank you
Hi,
very, very much.
No problem.
For that. You cut yourself off there when you were talking about the emotional thing, because
Yes, I was going to go back and just, yes.
And that happened to me, like an emotional release, and I didn't understand it, and I still don't. So if you can explain, thanks.
I'm not sure if I can explain that well, but I mean, it's that, so it is that we store emotions in our body. So, and this is what I love about the visceral, is this is exactly what we're talking about. All the time those emotions are stored in our organs. And in fact, Jean-Pierre, who does all this medical people to watch for, you know, he's actually written a book called Understanding the Messages in Our Body. And each organ has like certain emotions that are related to it, and then has certain symptoms so that you can sort of find it. So I think even Saul was saying now, we are completely connected, our brain and our mind and our emotions. So it makes sense, complete sense to me, that the body sort of, the body keeps score. It always sounds so horrible, but it kind of does. And so even when a lot of people actually go back to when they were really, really young, and you can't actually remember that, but your body has remembered it. Something has remembered. I kind of think about it like when you go under anesthetic, some part of you is alive and is registering what is happening, even if another part of you is not. I don't know if I'm really making sense here, but let me give you the example of a lady that I had, and maybe that'll help. So she came to me just because she was actually interested in craniosacral therapy and visceral therapy. And I started doing my listening, and I thought, oh, you know, she feels really restricted around her diaphragm. And I went to her diaphragm. Geez, it was taking forever. It took forever, but I stuck with it. And eventually she had a massive emotional response that she herself is a qualified TRE person. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a trauma release exercise. It's all related to trauma, and she's done lots of work in that field, but somehow she could just not release this trauma, which was sitting in her spleen. And yeah, she had and she said, I could see it physically, her breathing improved. She was really battling to take deep breaths, and as we released the spleen, because it sits so close to the diaphragm, and the body was able to relax, she just suddenly started breathing. And she actually then was crying with tears of joy, because she just said she's always felt like she couldn't breathe so well. And suddenly what Elaine was saying is we don't even know what normal feels like, because sometimes we've been walking around with it for so long, we just assume that we just have a tight chest or whatever it may be. I'm not really sure how I've answered your question. Sometimes I can't even explain how these things work. It's just the easiest way to explain it is that everything in the body is connected. Definitely our emotions are stored more in our organs. Our body remembers. It is, if you had to say anything, it is related to energy. We are energetic beings. Yeah, electrons from people. And so when you trauma, whether it be a physical trauma or an emotional trauma, it can change.
Tracy, does it kind of does it make it feel a little clearer, or there's still questions around it?
It does make sense, because now, as you were saying that, there was something I remember that suddenly a song came to me that my father used to play when we were young, and it kind of I remember that's what actually triggered it. So yeah.
So some people will tell me that they see colors. Some people will go back to like a picture. Somehow a picture comes to their mind. Everybody's different. It all is experience. And so for some people it's tears. Some people are laughing. Some people are yawning. Everybody, it all depends on the nervous system. I mean, I had one lady, she just could not stop yawning. And that was like her way of coming down the staircase, of her body sort of calming down. Some people have really sort of uncontrolled movements. You know, what we do with the cranial and the visceral is it's a space for your body to do what it needs to do. We kind of are just facilitating it. So the whole thing with like osteopathy and these kinds of therapies is that within us, we actually have the innate intelligence to know what we need to do. If you think of a baby, I mean, how do they know to stop growing a fingernail, or, you know, make so many cells and that's a kidney and then stop? There is something so intelligent inside us. It is still there. We just don't always listen to it. And that's what I love about like the visceral. We use that word listening a lot because that's exactly what we do. We listen to the body. And the nice thing with this work is you never do something that you haven't listened or received from the body. So it's very hard to do something wrong. I mean, you might not be effective, but you're very hard to cause harm, because you're actually following what the body is showing you as to where the restriction is.
Thanks, Tamsin.
Pleasure. I hope that helped.
I'm going to jump in and just add to that, because let's see, Lauren, thanks so much, Tamsin. Lauren Siegel, thank you so much for joining. Lauren is actually going to be one of the speakers in a few weeks' time, so I'm super excited. Thanks, Lauren, for your message. What I wanted to add is, yeah, you know, there really is, and having gone through various challenges in my life physically, and coming to the point of or connecting with my body, where you really, it has so much intelligence. Just like you said, the body holds so much intelligence, as opposed to us thinking we know everything. There's a different intelligence. It's actually, it's bigger, it's more powerful. It might sound a little bit abstract, but when you tap in and tune in and then use both modalities, the cranio and the visceral, you start really honing in that skill of listening to the body's conversation it's having. And it gives you so much more information than, you know, I know I haven't gone through various things than I could have thought of, you know, starting to be receptive, or at least starting off with considering your body can give you information. It can give you answers to heal. And I had quite a few, like Tracy just shared now, but there were a couple of things I've had with meditation and with yoga, where my body is just released. We did a weekend now. Jill was away with me now, and there were two times during the weekend and two poses I was going to go into, and my head was trying to not get in the way, and my body completely released and just cried, because there was stored tension and stress that was held in that. So, you know, there is that abstract thing, but I just think when we tune into our body's intelligence, it just gives us so many answers. So I love this work, Tamsin. Who else is curious? Who else has anyone had a craniosacral session or visceral therapy? Anybody in the house that has had it? Vanessa, tell me, what was your experience of it?
Someone recommended cranio to me because I used to have terrible headaches, and I went for several sessions. In fact, I went once a month, and it helped a lot. It was really very good for helping with headaches. And yeah, it seemed a bit sort of, as the person said to me, are you willing to try something sort of what you might call airy fairy? And I said, look, I'm willing to try anything at this point, because I was desperate, and it really did help. So
fantastic, good. I mean, do you go regularly, or did you just go for, you know, just dealing with the headaches back then?
I found that if I didn't go, then the headaches would come back again. So I actually went once a month for a long time. I actually, just before we went to Italy last year or the year before, I didn't go for the one treatment because she was ill. And I haven't been back since. I don't know if it's just managed to help them stay away. But if I feel a headache or something coming on again, then I would definitely go back.
Yeah. And do more of the when you can't go for a therapy or a treatment, like Tamsin said, it's those tools, your breathing, your yoga, your meditation.
Yeah, definitely.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Elaine, it's Nina. Sorry, I don't know how to get on the camera here.
Hi, Nina.
Hello. Yeah, so I've had quite a few craniosacral therapies when I was pregnant after having 2 miscarriages, and it was a very healing thing to do for me. But also when I was actually pregnant with my son Samuel, the lady that did it, Anna Keating, would say to me, you know, that the child in your stomach is going to feel this. And I don't know if it had an effect in the long term, but I really had a very beautiful, peaceful pregnancy and a beautiful birth. But what was more remarkable is that afterwards I would take him to her, and she would do it on him, and he would literally go like a marshmallow on his back, and he would become putty in her hands, and it's almost like there was the cellular level of memory for him. And thereafter, when I lost my dad, probably about a good 18 months of very deep depression, and I swear to this day that that's what kind of helped me come out of it. It was a very, very powerful experience for me. I haven't had it in a while, obviously because of lockdown, so probably 2 years ago. But when you say that, it almost triggers this response in my neck. It's quite amazing. I can imagine the way I get held, and yeah, it's a very, very powerful experience.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I really, you know, as a community, it's so nice for me. You know, Vanessa knows when we were in Italy, and my whole motto is it takes a village, and this is the village. We come together in the kitchen, and when we hear each other's stories, we just take strength from that. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Hi, Elaine.
Hi, Kath.
Hi. I just wanted to say I've had cranio with Tammy for spanning over many years, I would say. Not consistently, but for different situations in my life and surgeries. And in particular, when I had post-traumatic stress disorder from a traumatic back surgery, I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't get out of the stress scenario. And eventually my surgeon, who was a neurosurgeon, said, I can do nothing for you. You have to look for something alternate to deal with your nervous system. And I went back to Tammy after that, not so much for the physio reasons, but for the cranio. And within a few sessions, it was like as if this trauma was released. It was allowed to escape, and which had been completely held and locked into almost my whole organic system. Every organ seemed to be holding this trauma. And because Tammy had done cranio on me before, I think I was very receptive to it. And I continue to see her. And it's, for those who haven't done it, for me, it feels like when I have cranio, I am rebooted. Things that are scattered or emotions that are trying to be dealt with just crystallize and come together. But it's that rebooting of energy that I feel from the cranio. And it's just amazing. And for me, Tammy's my godsend. She knows that. So thanks, Tam.
Well, thanks, Kath.
Thanks, Elaine.
Hi, Elaine. Hi, it's Shireen.
Hi, Shireen.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Have you ever tried any craniosacral?
Yes, it's actually been very, very helpful for me. I have a very long history of childhood trauma, and I actually relate to what Tamsin's mom said about the one side of the body, from top to bottom, all the organs, stiffness in the shoulder, right down the spine, into the hips, twisting into the torso, and the hips working against each other. And at some point, I struggled immensely with tailbone issues. And craniosacral was really, really helpful for that. It's such a subtle and lots of emotional release around that for me as well. I would often feel wiped out after a session for the rest of the day. But the impact is not immediate. It wasn't for me. It wasn't immediately visible. But over time, it's almost like hypnotherapy. You don't even realize the change that it brings along, because I felt for me it worked, especially in my etheric body as well, because there would be lots of disruptions because of the trauma over time, and due to the flow increase in the aura or the energetic body, the body physically could then kind of catch up and come into its natural balance. So yeah, very, very beautiful therapy.
Well, that's a beautiful sharing. Thank you so much. I resonate with that a lot. You know, we don't spend a lot of time working on our or being as cognizant to our energetic body, and it's so powerful. Like you said, it's subtle, but when you start tapping into it, it's almost anything. But until you've met it, you can't you don't know. But once you meet it, and once you know that there's this ethereal body that has so much power over our health.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that. And Kathy, I don't know, I think you might have stepped up out the room for now, but your screen's on. Thank you so much. I loved hearing your story, and the more they're speaking, the more I'm like, I'm so phoning you tomorrow for an appointment. I have headaches all the time. Coming to see you. Anybody who else is still left in the house? It's nice hanging out. Go and pour more wine.
I might have to go to bed soon, because I do have 2 children who wake up very early, and to get them ready for school, it's a process.
Totally hear you. So let me see. Somebody just sent a message. Alison, great. Nice to have you, Alison. So last question, if anyone wants to just give it a, while Tamsin's still here. Any hands?
I see that Jill, I don't know if she's still here, but I see that she wrote that she's trained in CS, but she hasn't actually practiced it. So I would definitely say she should explore that.
Yes, and Jill's so talented. She's trained in so many things as a therapist and nutritionist. So I think she might have left already. So I'm going to just say thank you so much, Tamsin, for joining once again. An amazing, informative, so easy to listen to, your wealth of information. Thanks, Marlene. Lekker to see you as always. And then tomorrow, everybody, what I'll do is I'm going to send you all a WhatsApp on the broadcast group. And then Tamsin, you'll send me all the details. There'll be links to the books, and I hand over the information. If you want to make a session with Tamsin, with pleasure. Before you go, I've got a couple of you, 18 of you, 16 of you in the house. Next week is Dr. Sean Gottschalk, questions on COVID testing, anything you want to know. He's amazing. After that, Lauren Siegel, who has this beautiful story about her love affair with cancer. She's amazing. Tamsin, I'm so happy. You are welcome back in my kitchen anytime. And I will phone you tomorrow for a nice, make an appointment. So thank you
everybody for listening. I hope it wasn't too over the top or anything, but yeah, I love it. I'm passionate, so I'll talk anytime.
Brilliant.
Getting me to stop talking, that's usually the problem. Bye.
Take care.